Welcome to the Flourishing Leader podcast, where we dive into the dynamics of the professional working world. I'm Audrey Simmons.
And I'm Belinda Joseph-Pirame. This podcast is dedicated to inspiring leaders to live a life of well-being, both personally and professionally, so that they too may flourish.
So, talking about how to give feedback. Here's the thing too. The series is about giving feedback around kind of in intense situations. What if you had, a high performing employee who people are experiencing, their experience with that individual is not ideal. Maybe it is bullying. I don't know if we want to talk about that specifically. You have a high performer and they need an attitude adjustment. Because I think a high performer, when I think about that, is just somebody that really does an excellent job from a skill set, has excellent outcomes, but they struggle somewhere in relationships. Because a high performer isn't necessarily somebody that you are needing to give feedback about their work.
I suppose it's worth breaking down into a few parts, isn't it? Because there's the giving feedback and what do we mean when we say that? Mm-hmm. Giving feedback and in response to what? But what do we mean when we're talking about a high performer, a high performing employee?
Mm-hmm. And maybe it's not to the limit of bullying. It could be just they mouthed off, right? Or they spoke curtly to somebody.
Yeah, so there could be a sort of adverse thing that's happened. But I've certainly heard about instances where actually someone's just really highly capable, and they're a highly capable leader, being led also by a highly capable, high-performing leader. And there's a bit of a clash around that, because the high performer probably has their own ideas around how to get things done. At least this is what I've heard instances of. The high performer has their own ideas about how to proceed, how to get things done, and they don't want to be micromanaged. And so there can be challenges around, well, how then do I give feedback to this high performing person without taking the wind out of their sails?
Yeah. So I'm hearing okay, there's some sort of adverse event, right? There's a clash in opinion, a difference in opinion. The employee, the high performer, has a very clear idea of how things should be done. And we could venture to say has been successful in doing it, right?
Yeah.
They wish not to be micromanaged, and the leader wants to go a different direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's this almost, and this happens both ways, right? When a leader decides to say, okay, let's try it your way. And then also when the high performer says, okay, I'm going to get on board, there's this moment of trust, trusting, there's actually, maybe it's not even trust, it's a willingness to try something different, right?
Yeah.
So we're moving from being willful, this is what I see, to maybe the question is not which is more effective, because both have gotten the results that you want. But the question is, are you willing to try it differently?
Yeah. It's really highlighting that it's such an interpersonal, relational issue, really, isn't it? Because I was sort of sat with, well, when I'm receiving feedback, what is it that I am really responsive to versus what would cause me to withdraw or to push against? And I think there's something about clarity, clarity of intention that would be really, really important. I'd really hope to hear something around that. And I think there's something about being spoken to respectfully and in a considered way, but also where there's space for a kind of reciprocal conversation about something, and I wonder if in that process of giving feedback, that those would be really key things to keep in mind whilst, I guess, negotiating how are we going to move forward with this in a way that feels more positive.
So I'm hearing entering into this conversation, how someone could deliver or create a space where you felt comfortable to have a back and forth, like a collaborative space. It would require being heard, being seen, that everyone's intention is clear, right? Like the intention goal is to come up with the best solution, or, maybe it's not to come up with the best solution. Maybe there is a solution that has to go forward, right? So then if the objective can't be changed, then the purpose is to maintain the relationship, right? So, in maintaining that relationship, having everybody experience being heard, being seen, the clarity of intention, meaning like, I'm not out to dominate, right? I'm here to inform and collaborate about how we can move forward, and having that space be big enough so that there can be a conversation, a negotiation, if you will, right?
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because what comes to mind is that the distinction in leadership style between sort of inspiring and enabling somebody versus just telling them what to do. And which are major differences, because you get buy-in, hopefully, by being more facilitative and really capitalizing on somebody's gifts and talents.
Yeah.
Versus just get this done.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Yeah. And it's interesting to hear, that the feedback sometimes is, I don't want to be micromanaged. And I wonder if that word has lost its real meaning, because micromanaging, what's another way to look at micromanaging? Walking together, having each other's backs. You could spin that as, oh, my boss is constantly micromanaging, when maybe your boss is like, hey, I just want to make sure I'm up to date so that I can support you if things go south, right? If things don't work out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, how I understand some interpretations given, sorry, excuse me, that was a really creaky chair.
I didn't even hear it.
How I understand some interpretations given by different people I've had conversations with about micromanagement. There's something about somehow feeling devalued, like being told things, being given direction, being told what to do, being given tasks, things to complete, without the recognition that the person maybe already knows how to do those things and has been doing them really well. Feeling like they're not trusted, maybe to get on and use their own initiative to complete things as well. But it's interesting what you're saying, because there's something really positive, and it sounds like the intention is good, right? And I wondered, while you were saying that, I wonder if that's often how things get expressed. There's something really encouraging about, the hearing that boss that maybe is just trying to make sure you have what you need so that you can succeed at what you're doing.
Right.
Versus maybe they're coming from a place where they've got their aims, their targets, they're receiving pressure from whoever's above them.
Yeah.
And so that pushing, forcing you to get things done.
Yes.
Does that make sense? What I just
Absolutely.
said?
There's one that's more, it's like, I'm collaborating with you because I've been where you're about to go. And I know what that can look like versus like, there's so much to do these tasks because I'm your boss and I'm telling you to do them. Right. Like, I feel like, because there's been situations that I've been in where I have felt micromanaged and had to deal with a very intense situation. And I was so grateful afterwards that my person that I reported to had been there, had quote unquote micromanaged me, right? But really what they were doing is they were walking with me, if that makes sense. And in the aftermath, when I had to walk into the room and be questioned by many different regulatory agencies, I was so grateful that she had directed me the way she had, because I was able to walk out of that room with my head held high, when I had done exactly the right thing. But in the moment, 3 months before, I was like pulling my hair out because I was just like, why am I even here? I'm just like your gopher. I just do what you tell me to do, right? Like, I have no ability to take initiative, but it was inappropriate at the time. So there's also the timing, right? Like, what's the backstory?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it sort of reminds me of that thing of differentiation, the different approaches perhaps for different people and their different styles.
Yes.
And what strikes me about what you're describing is it sounds like there was a lot of wisdom in your line manager at the time, in terms of what was appropriate and helpful at what moment.
Yeah.
Which can be tricky, I guess, to determine sometimes.
Well, and I think too, could it have been delivered differently? Like, here's my intent. My intent, so when you join my team, for the first 6 months, you're going to feel like, is this really, because, if you join my team, right, you're a director, you're a manager, you're a CEO, whatever that looks like, right? When you join my team for the first 6 months, you're going to feel like you don't even have a team. Just know that that's going to be the felt experience.
Yeah.
But that's not my intention. My intention is to walk with you and to prepare you for what trains might be coming down the track that you might have to step in front of, so that you're well prepared, right?
Yeah.
There was no conversation like that. It was just like, no, this is what we're going to do. And so in the process, when you have two competent high performers, it's like getting your skin pulled off of you, right? Like, you're just like, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be really fractious, can't it? It can be a real point of conflict, that not understanding where one another is coming from.
Yes. So that clarity, like when you mentioned, it's so beautiful because it's like that clarity of intention, not only that you're clear about how you're showing up and what your intention is, but also communicating that, because we don't know unless we're told.
Yeah. There can be sort of quite a hefty price, can't there, of feeling micromanaged or being given feedback that is maybe delivered in a way that's less than ideal. It can be just so anxiety provoking, really stressful. It can really impact how people feel in their places of work, can't it? Because it seems like such a small thing, really. We're having this conversation about how to give feedback, and it's like, well, it sounds really simple, but actually it isn't always, and its impact can be really quite substantial, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I'm in this program, and we talk about, the way you approach really any situation. Like, you can have the objective. So that's to deliver feedback, let's say. And then there's the relationship piece, which if you don't consider it, can be damaged. And then there's also like self-esteem / self-respect, right? And those three things are very fluid, and they can change depending on the situation. So with a high performer, I know for myself, the relationship is first, and then the objective, and then the self-esteem of the situation for both parties.
Yeah.
However, if I'm not heard, like if I meet resistance, then the objective becomes number one, because I need that person to hear me. I may approach that situation as in, I want to talk first about the facts, right? And then I want to talk about how much that person means to me, because the relationship piece is important. But I also want to make sure that we're agreeing on facts first.
Yeah.
Because if we can't agree on reality, then we're gonna be stuck there for a little bit. But then, I know with high performers, there's a sensitivity, right? Because they work very hard to be great at what they do. And so to even feel like you're being sat down to get feedback can feel insulting, for people.
Yeah.
The Flourishing Leader podcast has two sponsors, Team of Greats, LLC, and Eudaimonic Therapy and Coaching. Our first sponsor, Eudaimonic Therapy and Coaching, provides psychotherapy for people struggling with stress, anxiety, and depression. Also on offer is executive coaching for leaders experiencing stress, burnout, and other well-being issues blocking personal effectiveness. For information or to book a free consultation, please visit www.eudaimonic.co.uk. That's www.eudaimonic.co.uk.
Our second sponsor is Team of Greats. Team of Greats is a coaching company partnering with professionals around the world, including those with ADHD or ADHD-like characteristics, offering individual leadership coaching, team coaching, and mindfulness courses. For more information, reach out to www.teamofgreats, that's GREATS.com, teamofgreats.com.
It's so interesting, what you were saying about the relational aspect of things, because what crosses my mind is that, the hope is that we all have these wonderful relational skills, and the reality is we're really differently set. It's a movable feast on any given day for any person, and I was just thinking of that, where the personal meets the professional. Our ability to function well in relationships is personal stuff, even though we're talking about the professional sphere. And some people might not have a great emotional vocabulary or a particular capacity for empathy, or, all of these moving parts that are really important in relating one human being to another. And also there's the stuff around, I encounter a lot of people that have challenges around real or perceived conflict, and having a frank discussion or an honest discussion would be really nerve-wracking and anxiety-provoking for them. They'd want to avoid that. And that might be related to, not necessarily, but it might be related to personal histories around conflict or messages around what it means to speak up. There's all of this really interesting stuff woven through what could be a really simple conversation, but actually is unlikely to be quite a simple conversation.
Yeah. And as a leader, recognizing that for yourself and for the other, right? That it deserves the time to prepare. It deserves the time set aside to be intentional about the conversation. Like, this isn't something you want to just do on the fly, because, someone may interpret feedback as like, I'm not safe, right? Like, all of a sudden my defenses are up because you're talking about my job, my work.
Right.
And so really saying to that individual, I need to have a conversation. We need to have a conversation, right? Not like I need to talk to you, but, we need to have a conversation, and, how important they are, but also how do you communicate? Hey, you're safe right now. Like, I know this can be anxiety provoking, and that's not the intention. It's just, we need to tweak something. We need to just change this little thing. It's not a big deal. But how do you communicate that
Mm.
more succinctly? Or does you showing up in your vulnerability, not having a perfect script, is that part of creating the safety too?
Yeah.
You're so perfected in what you're going to say. Maybe that doesn't allow the space for the individual to just say, this is really hard for me to hear. Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because I wonder sometimes, when a leader takes a more authoritarian approach to things, which could be for all sorts of reasons, I sometimes wonder if there can be a little bit of hiding in there, So not knowing how to do these other relational things, do they then fall back on, well, just get this done? A way of sort of grabbing back control and, I'm the leader here, because perhaps they're feeling less than, I don't know. But I'm really hearing in our conversation that there's something about this collaborative dyad moving forward in this really conversational, as positive as possible a way.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that, some hefty boundary setting can't happen if that's what's needed, depending on what's being spoken about.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think just one human being to another, just having a respectful conversation.
Yeah.
That can't have gone out of fashion.
I hope not. My God, because there's a hefty price tag, right? I mean, there's a price tag when we move from collaboration to dominating, right?
Yeah, that's a beautiful word to describe it. Yeah, because I think sometimes that approach, I think leadership can sometimes get confused with that. Like if I am just being dominant, authoritarian, I tell you what to do, then I am being the leader. And it's like, well, maybe in some environments that's appropriate and okay. But I think of leadership differently to that. I think it can have elements of authoritarianism when appropriate, but I think of it more as facilitating people, inspiring them, enabling them, like helping them to succeed in what they're doing.
Yeah, I agree. I think the more inexperienced a leader is, the more they lean into that authoritarian way of leading. You'll see, in my experience, you'll see that directiveness happen in an experienced leader when there's a crisis. Like when there's lack of time, then you'll see that show up.
Right.
But you won't see it show up very often. But yeah, the inexperienced leader leans on that card pretty heavily initially.
Yeah.
And I think, to be fair, we do the best we can. And also something else that I've learned is we can do better. We need to try harder, right? So you function within the span of your skill set.
Yeah.
In my experience, my goal is to surround myself with high performers, right? My goal is to surround myself with people that are smarter than I am, have more experience than I do, maybe less experience, but have innovative ideas, But the idea is to surround myself with people that are smarter than I am, and then allow them to thrive. And also, the idea is to keep people collaborative. And so there have been many times, because generally speaking, the teams that I've created are full of strong personalities, which I appreciate because it allows me to walk with them. And the job that I have sometimes is to give feedback when those strong personalities are not moving in the same direction, like there's conflict among the leaders, right? And so perhaps someone hasn't responded in the best way, like have talked behind somebody's back or didn't update somebody with the newest information that they needed in order to make a good decision. But the point is that there's been some conflict, right? And so bringing that individual in and saying, let's debrief is a word I use, as opposed to I need to talk to you. Let's debrief about what happened last night or the day before. I picked up something that just landed in my world as there being a little bit of static or conflict. And so I want to clear the air so I can better understand what happened in that interaction. So I sort of start out with seeking information, right? Checking to make sure if I was witness to it, right? If I was witness to it, making sure that I picked up that something was off, allowing that person to kind of tell me where their mind was, what their intention was, if there is a backstory to it. And then just saying to them, if it landed in my world as just kind of being off, I can't say I would have been the only one. And so we're fortunate it was just amongst us, the leaders, but just know that when the rest of the team is present, like when the rest of the 260 employees are there, if they were to witness that, how that might leave them feeling about us as a leadership team. So being very, what I'm saying, to be direct and clear, is we are always being watched as leaders. And so our interactions are important, that they are respectful and our intentions are clear. Like we're not out to get, to needle somebody, right? Because we are being watched and we role model, and our actions are louder than any words we could ever speak. So if it's just landing in my world as there's an issue there, it's also landing in other people's world. So whether or not there is just feedback there, what do you think could have been done differently, or what are we missing right now? I love using that question. What are we missing? Because it shows that I'm collaborating with them, and it assumes something's missing. I'm not asking you yes or no questions. I'm assuming something's been missing, right? So what else is missing? So that would be something I would approach if I had witnessed it. Now, if it was something that was being reported to me, I'd have a different approach, in that, it was brought to my attention that there was an interaction that happened the other day, with another individual. And usually as leaders, you can kind of say who it is, but then asking, help me understand what went on with this. And I guess even before that, if it was brought to my attention, not by the two individuals involved, but by a witness, that's the approach I would take, like getting the backstory from both individuals. Now, if it's one person complaining about another, then I would ask, have you spoken to each other? And after you speak to each other, especially if it's leaders, right? Now if it's, direct line staff and stuff, that depends on the situation. But if it's leader to leader, I'm asking if they've already spoken to each other. But for the point of this show, me giving feedback to an individual, it depends too on how far along in the process we are. If it's the first time we've had this conversation, I'm going to bring a lot of curiosity. The second time, I'm going to call it a pattern.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking about actually, and what you were describing, because what I can hear is this kind of setting out context, but also requesting greater understanding. And as you were describing these two instances where, this setting out context and requesting greater understanding, while you were doing that, I started thinking about, it also depends on what it is that's actually happening, doesn't it? Because I think that within that attitude of curiosity, and there's like an invitation there, isn't there? There's an invitation to have a conversation about something, and an invitation to get a bit clearer about something. But also there's an invitation to express one's expectations and to ask for something quite specific. But that is dependent upon the circumstances. Because I was just thinking about, I wonder where culture would sit with this as well. Are there opportunities or invitations to ask for something quite specific, or to say if actually something's just not okay, and to ask for something different. But I really like what you're saying. It sort of invites a conversation. And alongside that, I think in terms of thinking about the outcome of that conversation, is it that something needs to be expressed quite clearly or asked for or put into action in some way off of the back of that as well? And how is accountability going to be kept around that if that takes place? Yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, once safety, like, there's the curiosity, there's the understanding of context, there's the, gratitude kind of sprinkled in there. And then there's the feedback given and checking in with the other person on, so what's your response to this feedback? And then I think at the very end, so that everybody's clear, right? Because being clear is, as we say here, is being kind, succinctly saying, so this is what I need moving forward.
Yeah.
That can also be summarized in, an email. I used to do like a summary of conversation would be the title of the email. And I would start it off by saying, and I always do bullet points because I just think that's easier, but
simpler.
Yeah. I just say, listen, these are the things that we talked about today. If you can read over them, if there's anything you want me to edit, please let me know and send it back to me within 48 hours, just so that, we're all human. Right. And that also gives them an opportunity to really review what was said and, contribute to the memory of that conversation, which I think is really important, because after somebody leaves, there can be some rumination, right? There can be some reflection or rumination, depending where somebody goes. And to have a clear document that that's not what I said. I said this is, I think, important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the written part of things is so important, actually, because I'm certainly aware of people who've been in circumstances where there is no written record and things just get lost, not followed up on. It's like a conversation that happened and then it's just nothingness following that.
Yeah.
Which can be really unhelpful in the whole process, really. And I also think that if it was a conversation that was, that was quite emotionally energetic, and what I mean by that is if it was a bit of a passionate conversation, if there was a bit of conflict in that conversation, just gives people the space to take a breath, take a beat, sit in a calm moment, and then maybe look through, after they've regulated themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, feedback can hurt. I mean, even if it's delivered in the best way. I mean, if you're a high performer.
To a high performer, yes.
It hurts.
Yeah.
It does. And it doesn't make you less of a person to not be able to sort of take it on the chin and move forward, like it's okay that it hurts. It's okay that it's uncomfortable,
It's so activating for some people, isn't it? I mean, even that thing of we need to have a conversation about something, that'll just send, for some people, their blood pressure skyrockets at the thought. But yeah.
I think the call to action is, for this show is just remembering our humanity, remembering that, emotions come, they go, they're not stationary. They're not going to harm us, the emotion itself. And when we can't see clearly, to go back to the facts and to take a beat. You don't have to act or react right away. You can consider and try on that the other person has a point, right? That there's a kernel of truth in there somewhere, right? Yeah.
For sure. And I think also as well, one of the thoughts that crossed my mind is just giving yourself permission. So I know that some clients I work with struggle with more immediate responses to things. And especially if their physiology is going a mile a minute. And it's just giving yourself permission to return to something, requesting the space to take some time to think about what's come up. If it's not urgent, seeing if there's the possibility of doing that. Because I don't know if you have that experience, Audrey, but I've certainly experienced sometimes not feeling able to immediately respond to something and realizing, oh, actually, I think I need a bit of time to sit with this and see what I feel about it and what I think about it and what's possible and what's not possible. Mm-hmm. Even if an immediate response is being requested, it doesn't mean I necessarily have to give it.
Correct. Yes. Oftentimes, I think things are framed so that the person framing it is getting what they want on a certain timeline. And it's okay to say it's unreasonable to ask for feedback on this or an opinion on this. I think emergencies make themselves really clear. Like if it's an emergency, no one's like, should we call, the police, right? Like, when you need to call the police or, when you need, it's just, so if you have enough time to think like, is this an emergency? It's probably not one, right?
Yeah.
And so just take the time you need. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was great.
So.
That was great. It was really interesting to talk about that one. I know that we wanted to talk about it.
Yes.
We've wanted to talk about that for a little while because we're just hearing so many people asking questions about how to give feedback. So,
Yeah.
I think that's it, isn't it?
In summary, I'd say bring curiosity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Understand humanity, that emotions will show up. Understand the importance of being heard and being seen, and just clear intention.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us today, to those of you who are listening, and we'll catch you next time. Take good care.
Take good care. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Flourishing Leader podcast. We would love to hear directly from you. Please reach out to us by emailing contact@theflourishingleaderpodcast.com.
As we all know, supporting what you enjoy by taking action matters. If you enjoyed today's show, please make sure you subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app and leave us a review.
You can also find us on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn.
Thank you again for listening in. We look forward to hearing from you. Until next time, take good care of yourself.